Okay, super. All right. So, welcome everyone, and thanks so much for joining us today. We hope you and yours are keeping well and safe. My name is Kerr Smith. I'm the manager of cooperative community engagement with Gailey Foods Cooperative. For those of you who don't know, I know we have a lot of people. It's great to see we have people logging in already, over 150 people. So, and I know some people are from outside of Canada and even the continent, which is amazing. So, thought I'd let you know Gailey Foods is a Canadian-owned dairy cooperative with members on roughly 1,400 dairy farms in Ontario and Manitoba, and more than 4,200 producers and investor shareholders. I'm fortunate enough to be joined today. We're going to introduce our special guest in a moment, and another special guest, but someone that I'm super lucky to work with. I'll just quickly introduce Michelle.
Thanks, Kerr. So my name is Michelle Chrisman, and I'm the coordinator at the Gailey Dairy Museum and Cooperative Education Center. It's a beautiful 100-acre site located near Elmer, Ontario, where we have our dairy museum, as well as accommodations for retreats, meetings, and events like the Cooperative Young Leaders Summer Camp.
Awesome. So related to that, for the past few years, we've enjoyed having an ever-evolving event called Co-opalooza, where we come together to network, to learn, to celebrate cooperation. Obviously, this year, we're unable to meet in person, but we wanted to pivot and and figure out a different route to make sure that we can still connect, we can still share resources, and hopefully provide a little light and inspiration during these trying times. So before we actually get into the session today, I'm just going to turn over to Michelle, who's going to give you a few housekeeping bits and pieces on the technical side of the webinar.
Okay, thanks, Kerr. So again, thank you so much to everyone for joining us. And I'm sure most of us now are familiar with Zoom, but I'll just cover a few quick housekeeping details to make sure this is a great experience for everyone. So you'll notice that for this webinar, all attendees have been muted, but we encourage you to use the chat function to introduce yourselves and engage with your fellow attendees throughout the webinar. Clicking on the chat icon at the bottom of your screen will bring up the chat window. We will be using the polling function a little later on in the webinar. And once we're ready for that, you'll see the polling box pop up on your screen. You just need to click to select your answer. Make sure you hit submit, and we'll take care of the rest. You can move the polling box around on your screen by clicking and dragging the top of the box. And for those of you who are interested, we will be recording this session and plan to have it available for viewing on our website.
Great, thanks, Michelle. And at the end, also for those who would like to stick around and have a chat, provide some links, resources, we'll keep the session going at the very end. I know some people are already saying hello from different parts of the world and maybe want to share some cool resources and stories. So regarding this particular session today, we thought it'd be important to highlight how and why co-ops have always formed in great times of need. We're going to be doing that through some incredible historical examples and also some amazing contemporary stories. And we thought this would be especially important as we work together to create this new normal. With that said, I can think of no one more fitting to help us kick off this series than the president and CEO of Gailey Foods, Michael Barrett. As the chair of the Durham District School Board, former teacher, and a self-proclaimed history nut, Michael is also a true co-op champion who, beyond many different projects and endeavors, has volunteered an amazing 19 summers at the Cooperative Young Leaders Summer Camp, which we now host at the CEC and Dairy Museum. So thank you, Michael, so much for joining us today, taking the time, and I'll turn the socially distanced mic over to you now. Oh, I think, Michael, I think it's muted right now, so.
Yeah, I got a double mute here just to be safe, Kerr, so I appreciate that. So it's good to see a number of people here, names that I recognize. Certainly Gary Savigny, been a long time since our pathways have crossed, and I see that Carol Fleming is on as well. It has been my distinct pleasure, as Kerr has mentioned, to be able to be a facilitator for the last 19 years. I was going to take a year off this summer, and I think that's the reason why we had to cancel and got COVID, because the camp just can't go on without me. I know I'm kidding, Carol. So what I want to do is this is not going to be a commercial for Gailey Foods. What I want to be able to share today is a little bit about the resiliency of cooperatives and also about what Gailey Foods is doing in order to be able to work within the COVID crisis. And certainly being part of the food industry, Gailey Foods, like many other food manufacturing companies within Canada and cooperatives within Canada have certainly felt the roller coaster ride of being in the food industry as well. So I'm going to share my screen. And Care, you'll tell me if it's not working. Give me the thumbs up, Care, if you can see it. Excellent, thank you so much. First of all, I would like to thank both Care and Michelle, and behind the scenes, Ovi Hansen, for being able to make this happen. We have certainly, through the leadership of both Michelle and Care, have come forward in being able to develop the concept of a cooperative education center in Ontario, something that's been badly needed. A province that has a rich cooperative history, a credit union history, that really doesn't have a single focal point. And certainly in partnership with the Ontario Cooperative Association, being able to hopefully find a permanent home for the Cooperative Young Leaders Program as well. So I thank them for their vision and their leadership, and certainly in being able to be resilient in a year that being able to literally touch each other is not possible. Being able to go forward the co-op, the concept, pardon me, of the Bed-Head Web-Ed Series. And you can see the creativity that's being put in that. So what I want to be able to talk about today is certainly one of my favorite authors, who certainly the quote, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness, it was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair." And I know that all of us on the webinar today would certainly recognize when life started to change towards mid-February, and then certainly hit us around March the 6th. And certainly it is the best of times and the worst of times. And what I want to be able to do is talk a little bit about the worst of times, but I also want to talk about how it has also become the best of times. I mean, certainly I'm a Charles Dickens fan. The Christmas Carol, certainly when it was written in the 1840s, certainly illustrated the very worst that society could be. But out of that book, out of that very instrumental piece of literature that appeared in the London papers and was published in the 1840s, came a desire and a change that took place in society. And I think that we are in today seeing a change in society. And I think the cooperatives have a real element on being able to make sure that the foundations of what we offer as cooperatives continue to be an important element of moving forward. So certainly we have experienced COVID crisis, and this is probably the first time in history that illustration of the micron telescope, that we recognize that symbol, whether it's been cartooned, and I don't know, Care, if that's something you've done yet in your skill set, but most of us will recognize this symbol, whether it's in the cartoons in the Washington Post or whether it's in the cartoons in the Toronto Star. This symbol has come to mean something very different for all of us. It is certainly something that is a recognized brand very quickly within society today. And so for us, it's about, so what has been the impact of the COVID crisis? We all represent a lot of different cooperatives and credit unions on this call, and as Care has said, globally, outside of the continent, which is quite incredible. But the impact has certainly been very, very different. It's different on a cooperators as it is from a daily food-to-food manufacturer. It's different from a workers' co-op who repairs bicycles. It is different and impacts us all differently. I wanted to be able to talk from a broad perspective on what it has meant for Canada, and then want to talk a little bit about what we have done to be able to ensure that what we do is represent our values, and be able to ensure that what we're doing is managing and leading and sometimes following through this COVID crisis. So, as you may know, for the first time since 2014, It's the first negative gross domestic product in Canada. I'm not here today to be able to share with you an economics lesson, but I just want to be able to place this into context at the very considerable change that has taken place in a very, very short period of time. Certainly, when we look at the SARS virus, the H1N1, and now the COVID, what we're seeing is a significant difference and the shortening of the pathways for being able to have global pandemics and global crisis. But since the first time since 2014, we have experienced a negative growth that is going to impact, obviously, Canada and its economy. We've also seen a very steep decline in consumer confidence. And this is more than just being able to determine what we want to be able to purchase, but it's those things that are happening behind closed doors. And I certainly mean behind closed doors. Because, you know, in the social isolation and the self-isolation and the familial isolation, there are a lot of things that are happening behind closed doors. This is not only, I think, reflects consumer confidence in the economy, consumer confidence in being able to whether or not they're going to have a position on whether or not their families are going to be impacted. It's also, I think, reflecting the state of our mental and social health across our society, because there are many, many challenges that people are facing that we as custodians have to be aware of and also be able to lead through as well. Because certainly the COVID crisis has certainly given us the rise to be able to make tough decisions. And as a cooperative, or as a business, or as a government, or as a family, it has seen very tough decisions that we're having to make. And I'm sure that everybody here on this call today, 150 plus, all have personal stories on being able to share about the tough decisions that have had to be made. Myself, I have the majority of my family, and I have 6 children, and some son-in-laws, and some grandchildren. Most of my children are in the healthcare profession, whether they are paramedics, firefighters, or nurses. And we had to make some tough decisions about socially isolating from the risk, from being able to separate our family, being able to ensure that I even moved my son out of the house, which was kind of a blessing. We'll talk about that later. But being able to understand that there's some very tough decisions. And as business leaders, as societal leaders, and as cultural leaders, we've had to make some very, very difficult decisions. And I would be lying to you to tell you that some of those decisions are very, very difficult to be able to make. I'm sure that each of your organizations and businesses have had to make some very difficult decisions. At one point, we had over 10% of our staff laid off from Gailey Foods. Certainly with the decline of the food service industry and being able to service a restaurant takeout business that was not there, that disappeared literally in 24 hours, it was a very, very, very difficult month of April. We've seen some recovery, but it's still not what it was, and we still have some more difficult decisions to be able to make. We also have some good decisions to make as well. But we're not the first generation that have had to be able to make difficult decisions. These are the forefathers of the Rochdale movement, who came forward in the 1840s to be able to understand that they also had some difficult decisions to be able to make. In societal change, in economic crisis, this group of individuals got together to be able to create something with the first modern cooperative and establish principles that have been refined and defined and edited and expanded over the last 175 years. But we too are not the only ones that have had to face a crisis. And each generation has its abilities and desires to be able to work through and forward. And I think that we have to continuously remind ourselves, and it's probably a good segue to the second part of this session, care, and being able to, be able to have that quiz. The Rochdale Pioneers created the first modern cooperative because there was an economic societal crisis. I'm not saying we have to reinvent our cooperative model, but I think what it does is reinforce and strengthens what we are about and the values proposition that we bring. So what we have done at Gailey Foods is we have developed very quickly during the COVID crisis a very simple five mantras that we wanted to be able to create. First of all and foremost, it was critical for us to keep our employees safe and informed. That was our #1 goal, and if it meant being able to alter, it meant being able to send people home, it meant being able to change and shift our business, if it meant being able to invest in order to be able to keep our employees safe, that was the first and foremost thing that took place. We went from a head office of about 140 people to a head office of 7 people, literally overnight, in being able to make sure, like many of your organizations, because I saw some of the pop-ups that came up, you know, I'm from Cooperatives, I'm working from Owen Sound, or I'm a Cooperatives, I'm working from home, because that's the reality of what we've all done to be able to keep our employees safe. We have also been able to make sure that what we are doing is following the recommended guidelines. Sometimes there are different guidelines, and as a multi-provincial organization, we have different guidelines in Quebec, as we do in Ontario, as we do in Manitoba, as we do in Alberta. But it's been our role to be able to make sure that we understand the recommended guidelines and communicate. As a food producing company, we're an essential service. Some organizations could shut down. The Gailey Foods could not shut down. Being able to make sure that we provided nutritional dairy products to society and consumers was a critical component. And certainly both the government and our board certainly made sure it was part of our mantra to be able to keep open and keep running, much to the angst of many of our employees. Because as some individuals were able to stay home and protect, our workers had to come in order to be able to process. Also, we had to maintain the financial stability of our cooperative, being able to make sure that what we do is took some tough decisions in order to be able to make sure that our cooperative was financially stable. I will tell you, in the over 2 decades that I've been at Gailey Foods, that April financial results were the worst results we have seen in history. It was the first time in history of Gailey Foods that we lost money, and we didn't lose a little bit of money, we lost a great deal of money. It was the reality and the important element of being able to make sure that our cooperative is healthy as we move on to our 5th mantra, planning for a return to normal. I'm not sure what normal is ever going to look like. And if anyone knows me, Carol Fleming, you know me, I'm nowhere near normal. I don't know what normal is, but I'm not sure what normal is anymore. And as we reinvent society and we reinvent the way that we work and we reinvent the way that we operate our businesses, we're going to redefine what normal is. We're not sure that normal will ever be the same way it was prior to March the 6th. So what have we also done at Gailey Foods? And we've had to be able to work on principles. First of all, we have made sure that we have adhered to transparency. It's critically important that we're not hiding anything from our employees, that we're absolutely being able to make sure that every employee understands and knows what's going on at the cooperative, how business is being affected, and how we need to be able to react as individuals, as a community, and as a cooperative as well. Certainly, we've been able to protect. We have spent millions of dollars on personal protective equipment. We have yards and yards and maybe miles of plexiglass that have been installed in our plants. We have ensured that what we have installed, you know, infrared temperature scanners when you walk in. We are doing what it needs to take to be able to protect the most valuable resource that we have, and that is our employees. Considerable dollars are being spent, considerable time is being spent, but it is one of our elements to make sure that every one of our employees feels safe at the workplace and they go home and can celebrate with their families and come back to work the next day in the same way that they came in. We also have been able to have a mantra of being able to communicate. We communicate at least twice a week to every one of our 1,000 employees, and we do it through many, many different channels. We're using a bat phone when we have to. We're using iPhones. We're using anything that we can do right from paper in order to make sure that every single employee understands what's going on, the impact, and what guidelines they need to be able to follow. And in fact, each employee has my personal cell phone number. Each employee has my email address, and I will communicate with employees, all 1,000, at any point, at any time, in order to be able to answer or direct any questions that our employees have. And they have been calling on weekends, at night, early in the morning. I'm an early riser, it's a good thing. But it's an important element of being able to make sure that there are no walls being put up on being able to share information. And we have learned to be able to make sure that we share. And when I talk about share, I mean about sharing with our employees, but also being able to share with our community as well, on being able to understand that there are things that we need to be able to do. So we have certainly made significant hundreds of thousands of dollars of donations to food banks. There are now 4.5 million people that are unemployed. And there is a greater need than ever on being able to ensure that the local food banks have milk products, ranging from anything from butter and sour cream to fluid milk, because now more than ever, there is a gap in society. And when the first priority is being able to pay your rent and not being able to have enough food on the table, it's a critical component. We also want to make sure that our mantra is knowledge. We want to be able to be the disseminator of knowledge to all of our employees. There is so much information coming out. There is so much. To mask or not to mask. To face shield or not to face shield. 5 people or 10 people. 6 feet or 20 feet. To visit the grandchildren or not to visit. To travel outside the province or not to travel outside the province. To shop or not to shop. All those elements. What sanitizers to use. And Gailey has had to become the disseminator of knowledge to our employees, because it is too huge, it's too wide, it's too broad to be able to keep track. So we have taken it upon ourselves in our communication to be able to disseminate knowledge to our employees, because it's very difficult to keep track. What's truth and what's not truth? That's a very, very difficult thing, where social media doesn't necessarily disseminate or differentiate between the two. And certainly we want to be able to support. We close off our communications about being safe, being well, wash your hands, socially distance, and help a neighbor. And we have encouraged our employees, and they have responded to be able to help that neighbor that needs groceries, on being able to make sure that that neighbor next door is okay, on being able to make sure that the young children are engaged. Those elements, that the smallest elements can make a difference. My daughter, who is a paramedic, ran into a grocery store to be able to get some groceries. She was wearing her uniform, and when she came out of the grocery store, someone had put a note on her windshield, being able to express their thankfulness of being a paramedic and in the front line. Those small elements go a long way on being able to keep people focused and know that they are supported. So we have done things like home baking kits for frontline workers, for grocery retail workers that have to go into work. And we have provided them with home baking kits. We want to honor the front line. We want to honor the front lines of those health professionals that must go into work, that must be able to keep us safe and sacrifice hours and families. And we have been able to go forward with home baking kits, being able to deliver them to them. We've also done baking puzzles. We know that society has changed. I probably have not played so much Monopoly in my life since I was 15 years old. But the reality is pulling out of those games on being able to keep oriented. There's only so many Netflix series that I can watch that I'm interested in. So we handed out baking puzzles to families of frontline workers that needed something to be able to engage families. We want to be able to make sure that we put the values proposition first. And certainly we want to continue to be able to honor those who continue to be able to come in. Our employees are heroes as well. And as we said, there are a lot of heroes, and we have certainly helped to support and develop the tagline that all heroes, not all heroes wear capes, because every single employee at Gailey Foods that comes in every single day is a hero. They don't necessarily have the cape. They don't necessarily have the Batman cape answering the bat phone, but there are a lot of individuals, those insurance agents that can continue to be able to service their customers, the leaders that continue to be able to engage youth, the teachers that continue to be able to ensure that our children are still taught. They're all heroes. They're just not all wearing capes. And honor is an incredible point. We know that this is not over. This whole concept of 2020 vision, we know that 2020 is not, it's not over. There are rumors of a second wave. There are rumors of all sorts of things that are going to occur. But certainly what we know is that it is not over by any stretch. And we need to continue to be able to dig deep into our values proposition, be able to live by the values, peace, and our mantra, and continue to be able to move forward. But the one thing that I want to be able to close, always conscious of my time, care, is being able to, there is an importance to be able to lead, for sure, within this pandemic crisis, within COVID. But I'm also suggesting on a closing note that sometimes we also have to follow the fence row. And what I mean by that is that sometimes we aren't always going to lead. Sometimes we have to follow direction that's being given to us. Sometimes we have to follow the advice of medical professionals that we are not. Sometimes we have to be able to understand that we have to follow in order to be able to lead our co-ops and our economy out of this. And I know that in the old days of the old farm, the fence row was a welcome sign of civilization and a methodology of being able to find your way back to the farmhouse. So in this crisis, we have to follow the fence row. To follow the fence row also means we have to follow our values, we have to follow our principles, and we have to continue to be able to know that when the post is standing upright, we're close to home, close to our values, and close to being able to make a difference as we work through this crisis. Thanks, Kara.
Thanks so much, Michael. Really appreciate it. What we'll do is, if you're okay, Michael, maybe just stop sharing the screen for a moment.
Yeah, I'm going to give it back to you.
Okay.
There you go.
And Michelle, I think you're still muted.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks so much, Michael, for those impactful words and for taking the time to speak with us today. And thanks for the great lead up to the second half of the webinar as we take a brief look at some inspiring and oftentimes unrecognized stories from our cooperative past and present. So how we're going to do this is through a cooperative group quiz. As we go along, we're going to ask a few quiz questions, which you'll be able to answer on your screen in real time. You'll have about 10 seconds to submit your answer, and then we'll share the results immediately. So just for fun, we encourage you to keep track of your personal score, which you can compare at the end to the collective score. So we anticipate that the results will show what we already know, that we're far better and smarter working together. So hopefully that sounds good, and we'll get started down story lane.
Awesome, thanks, Michelle, and thanks again, Michael. Sorry, as we know, I'm doing trying to do too many things at once, so I didn't give a good send off. But thanks for taking the time today, Michael, for the great words. So, as Michael mentioned, as a glaringly obvious observation, we're living in unprecedented times that require great reflection, great meditation, great growth, and especially great cooperation. Looking around the sector, I often see this phrase on websites and posters, and I love this phrase. I think it's super fitting, but maybe not for the reason you'd expect. So if you take a look at the word cool, think of all the words, adjectives that have come in and out of fashion over the years. Most of them do. Groovy, far out, solid, dope, rad, radical. There's one word that has never gone out of fashion, and that's cool. If you think about it, cool has never been uncool. Cool is always just cool. And that's why I think it's so fitting to describe co-ops this way, because co-ops are the same. Cooperation has never been out of fashion. Cooperation has never been cool, and it's never been the wrong road to take. Even hearkening back to the days where we were huddled in caves, we knew cooperation was the way forward, as evidenced by so many prehistoric paintings from Borneo to France, where you see these community group paintings, where each and every hand was represented, was a voice, was part of a family. Now, don't worry, you haven't logged on to the world's longest podcast. I know you're thinking, oh my gosh, he's gone back. This is a quiz and he's gone back to the cave days. No, I just thought it would be worth noting that co-ops have always been the formula for communities who thrive, especially in times of distress, hardship, injustice, and unrest. So what Michelle and I want to do now is bring to life, through some amazing stories, this quote that I love, that, and Michael touched on this already, that in times like these, it's helpful to remember there have always been times like these, and that cooperation has always been cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight two inspiring stories, sometimes separated by centuries, but still tied together across history in their mission, such as the pair shown here, united in their fight to alleviate poverty in securing fair pay and having ownership of their craft. So, and with that, we are going to start the challenge with a group quiz. So here we go for the first one. Where did one of the world's first unofficial cooperatives, the Fenwick Weaver Society, form? What you're going to see is a poll pop up on your screen. You can make your selection. You only have a few seconds. And then please make sure you hit submit at the end.
All right, answers are pouring in, and we're going to count you down. 3, 2, 1, and polling is closed. So it looks like, Care, our audience has chosen answer number B. So let's see.
What a great way to start. I'm so pleased because we were hopeful. That is the correct answer.
Awesome.
Scotland was where the Fenwick Weavers began. So while we often hear about Rochdale being the first cooperative, the first known cooperative society was actually formed nearly a century beforehand in the Ayrshire region, Fenwick, Scotland. So it began when a group of 16 weavers met in secret to sign a pledge of loyalty to each other. That pledge was to regulate prices they would pay and would charge, to plan collective purchases, and mostly a pledge to support one another in the face of the local aristocracy. I love this picture right here because this is a picture of the Parliament wall, and this is by the village pump, and this was the actual wall where these weavers would meet on a daily basis, and their wives and children, the accounts show, would be on the lookout for any of the bosses or the aristocracy around as these weavers would meet and plan their, they said, radical and dangerous ideas that eventually became them formalizing this cooperative society.
Thanks, Karen. Over 200 years later, co-ops are still proving their relevance as a way to improve workers' rights and create living wage jobs. So let's take a look at Evergreen Cooperatives. Launched in 2008 by a working group of Cleveland-based institutions, the Evergreen Cooperative Initiative has become a global innovation model for creating more sustainable regional economies, as it works to create living wage jobs in 6 low-income neighborhoods in Cleveland. Rather than employing a trickle-down strategy, Evergreen Cooperatives focus on rebuilding the economy from the ground up, as local residents earn an ownership stake while functioning as a connected group of worker-owned cooperatives. This inspiring project has drawn national and even global media attention, so much so that you'll often hear it talked about by economic development professionals as simply the Cleveland model.
Awesome, thanks, Michelle. So that leads us to the next quiz question for you. Michael touched on this a little already, so hopefully you were listening. This is the quiz to see. So in what year was the official cooperative form? First official, I'm stumbling over that. Okay, let's see.
Okay. See, all right. Okay, and we're going to count you down now to 3, 2, 1, and we are done. And let's see. All right, Care, so it looks like D was the overwhelming response.
D, by a hair, the group wins again. Correct. D, 1844 is the answer. That was a close one, but the co-op pulled through. All right. So the Brosco Pioneers are regarded as the founders of the cooperative movement, as Michael said. By the mid-1800s, tradesmen in Rochdale, which is near Manchester, were faced with miserable working conditions and low wages, and they couldn't afford the high prices for foods and goods. So in 1844, as we just learned, a group of 28 artisans all worked for 4 months, scrimping and saving £1 each to be able to gain enough capital so that they could open and start their own consumer-owned store. This is actually a picture of a meeting out front of the actual store, which I love. Having learned from failed attempts in cooperation before, they designed the Rochdale principles, as Michael spoke about, and these principles that we know, and they're still the principles that we found our cooperatives on to this day. And still to this day, which I love, you can visit the original Rochdale store, that's it again, but now with an extended museum, gorgeous museum on the side.
Thanks, Kara. That is definitely on my bucket list to visit that museum. So as Rochdale started really as a way to tackle food insecurity, it brings us to a like-minded co-op addressing that same issue today. So in 2013, planning began for the Central Brooklyn Food Co-op, a 100% working member-owned and operated food store with membership open to all. Their mission is to utilize their collective strength to ensure access to affordable and fresh food. According to Central Brooklyn Food Co-op founding member Ray Gomez, we want our children to have a place to go where they can learn and enjoy food. We want to continue this effort to support Black farmers and other farmers of color. We want to increase political education in our community and cooperative economics in our community. This is not just a food store. This is an effort of community self-determination. And just, I love that phrase. Although the doors aren't open yet, it's scheduled to open this summer. It speaks to the passion and power of community, that they've been working tirelessly on this since 2013, have not given up, and raised over $25,000 in less than a month, and over $50,000 to date to secure a physical location for their co-op. And now Kara's going to lead us in our first example of how co-ops have contributed to the fight for gender equality.
Super, thanks, Michelle. So here's the next question for us. Formed in 1883, the Cooperative Women's Guild advocated for what issues, or which issues?
And here's the poll.
So we're 2 for 2, co-op, let's go.
Let's go. Oh, it's neck and neck here, and we're gonna 3, 2, 1, and we're stopping. Oh, just by a narrow margin, our audience has chosen D.
Well, I'm pleased to say, once again, the co-op has come through by a hair. D is correct.
Well done.
So and I could have made a whole list here, because while the Women's Cooperative Guild did advocate for equal pay and also for peace, incredibly, they took on so much more. So it was founded in 1883 by Alice Ackland and Mary Laurison, and the Guild was originally focused on just spreading the word about cooperatives, but it soon after became engaged in an amazing number of political campaigns on issues such as promoting birth control, child health, divorce reform, and the legalization of abortion. And actually, maternity rights in 1911 first came into being because of the pressure from the Women's Cooperative Guild. After World War I, the Guild became more involved in peace activism, and in 1933, they actually introduced the white poppy as a pacifist alternative to the red poppy, meaning peace at all costs.
Wow, those are some amazingly powerful women. Let's take a look at another group of amazing women. Cafe Femenino is a women-led coffee cooperative enterprise that started when, in 2004, 464 women farmers in northern Peru decided to take back their power by separating their coffee production from the men's. In that moment, for the first time, this group of women created their own product and income. They also created gender-focused programs to support social justice and empowerment for women coffee producers worldwide and their communities. Co-ops participating in Cafe Femenino must provide their women farmers with access to guaranteed benefits, including legal rights to the land on which they farm, leadership positions within the co-ops, and financial and business decision-making power. Cafe Femenino has been incredibly successful, which leads us to our next question, Care.
Since its foundation in Peru, 2004, Cafe Femenino has now how many women-owned and operated co-ops around the world?
Okay, let's see if we can keep up our winning streak.
What is that, 3 or 4? I lost count. I got excited.
That's 3 so far, 3 out of 3. All right, and we're going to close the poll in 3, 2, 1, and we're closed. Okay, so this This was an overwhelming, this was a sweep for answer C. So how did we do, Care?
Obviously, wouldn't it be great if that was the overwhelming and everyone wrong? But no, that is correct. 10. So 10 is the correct answer, not surprisingly, because what a powerful program. But since its inception, the Cafe Femenino model and project has expanded to every corner of the globe, run by an amazing project for women, by women. And this amazing project highlights an essential need to be filled for so many around the world, and that's the practice of fair finance and gaining access to fair credit, which takes us to our next question. In the year 1900, Canadian moneylenders could legally charge any interest rates they wanted, even as much as... Now I see it's 11:42. We might go just a couple minutes over, but I promise we've only got a few minutes and we won't go too far into your lunch. But hopefully you can stick with us for a few extra minutes.
Okay, so we will close the poll in 3, 2, 1. And another sweep here, Care, and our audience has answered with A. How'd they do?
3,000. The co-op thinks that's an acceptable rate. Well, not acceptable, 3,000%. Shockingly, 3,000% if you can wrap your head around it. That was what some financial institutions were charging as interest rates in 1900. Upon observing this, Alphonse Desjardins was stunned and appalled, a young man in Quebec, and he embarked on a lifelong crusade, determined to find a way for Canadians to have access to fair credit and to be treated with respect by their financial institutions. So after a great deal of painstaking research, Alphonse Desjardins and his wife Dorimène, who's pictured there, accomplished something revolutionary. On December 6th in 1900, they had 130 citizens sign a pact to found the Caisse Populaire de Lévis, where they lived in Lévis. And that was the very first savings and credit cooperative, not only in Canada, but in all of North America. Incredibly, during the first few years, the head office and where most of the transactions took place was in their home, which is pictured here. And thankfully, to this day, they've preserved it, and you can go and visit that exact home in Lévis, Quebec, the birthplace of the North American credit union movement.
And now let's fast forward to 1993 on the other side of the world, where a group of incredibly brave and determined women in the Cape Coast region of Ghana came together on a mission to overcome unequal and, frankly, in many cases, misogynistic and oppressive circumstances by starting their very own progressive women's credit union, providing education, financial support, and services by women for women in their community.
And as just this little sidebar personal note, I really wanted to include this in here because I was fortunate enough in 2012, the International Year of Cooperatives, to have visited this credit union on a cooperative education trip to Ghana. And I can tell you, I can still feel the goosebumps and remember all the tears shed by us in the group as we sat and met with the members and staff and listened to their harrowing and, being honest, oftentimes horrible stories, but amazingly empowering stories of how these women came together, rallied together, supported each other, continued to do so, and ran this credit union. The first time ever that they were able to save and take that kind of control over their financial state. So this leads us to a pair, the last pair we're going to celebrate today, as they advocate for civil rights and social justice. And in light of this, our final quiz question. Now we are, no pressure co-op, but we are perfect so far. So let's see how we do here. Last question.
Okay, so we will close the poll in 3, 2, 1. It's very close. Let's see. And just by a margin, it was D. How did we do?
Well, you know what? Nobody's perfect, and this is a good thing to show that sometimes, you know, we still have to keep working to improve, because the answer is actually 1909. But it was 1909 when the NAACP was created, and one of its founders was another individual of great bravery, as we've seen throughout today. who is also a huge advocate of the cooperative movement. This is W.E.B. Du Bois. He was an American sociologist, historian, and social rights activist, and he believed the cooperative structure was the effective antidote to racial economic injustice. In 1907, he actually put out a huge, incredible, comprehensive study of cooperative endeavors by African Americans in the 1800s, and this then led to him forming what he titled in 1918 the Negro Cooperative Guild. And this guild provided cooperative economic education to Black entrepreneurs, encouraging them to start their own consumer co-ops in their communities. Du Bois' amazing life work then inspired this book here, Collective Courage, which chronicles African-American cooperative business ownership and its place in civil rights history. Just an unbelievable story.
Yeah, what an incredible man. Following that theme of social justice, let's take a look at Aorta Co-op, and that was founded in 2010. So continuing the tradition of promoting equality through cooperation, Aorta is a worker-owned co-op based in the United States. It's devoted to strengthening movements for social justice and a solidarity economy. This passionate group works as a collective of consultants and facilitators to expand the capacity of cooperative, collective, and community-based projects through education, training, and planning. As they articulate on their website, the lives and work of these educators are dedicated to struggles and movements that build power and are rooted in racial, gender, economic, environmental, and disability justice. Pretty inspiring.
Awesome. So I think we know the quiz results. I think we should all be very proud of ourselves. That was a 5 out of 6. What I would encourage you to do is, if you are going along yourself and keeping your own score, take a look at it and compare it to the 5 out of 6. I'm not a mathematician. I don't know what percentage that is. But I would hope that for the most part, we see, as we already know, that we are far stronger and smarter together. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to end by coming back to where we started. As per this timeless quote by T.S. Eliot, that we shall not cease from exploration, and at the end of all exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Since our days huddled together in caves, many times during all of our exploring, we've gone far off course, and in many instances, tragically so, causing unspeakable pain to our fellow humans. But during these days we're experiencing, these difficult but immensely important days of self-reflection as individuals, as communities, and as a planet, I think it's essential to go back to our roots, back to the start, to the origins of community, back to these hands. Look at these hands, hands of all colors, shapes, sizes, all collaborating to create, to build, and to grow together, and know this place for the first time. Cooperation has always been cool. Cooperation has always been the answer, and it will continue to be as we rebuild a better world. So we want to thank you for joining us today. Sorry, we went a couple minutes over. Thank you, Michael, again so much for kicking this series off and for your great words. As you can see on the screen here, we'll be back next week at the same bat time, same bat phone, bat computer that Michael had, with Mike from Libro, amazing, interesting guy. And this will be more of a Q&A, that session where we'll be using the chat feature and you can ask questions and be more interactive during the session. If you haven't checked it out and you don't know our project, for those out of province, etc., there's our website right here, and you can learn a little bit more about what we do. And if you have any questions or comments at all, any suggestions, please don't hesitate to send us a message. Michelle, any parting words?
Just want to thank everyone so much for joining us. This was great, and thanks again to Michael. And we hope to see you next week, and have a great weekend and stay safe.
So what we will do is stay online for a few moments. For those, I see we haven't had a chance to do too much chatting today. So those who want to connect, send valuable links, resources, stories. If there's some other historical stories that I know we could have done a whole course on amazing co-op stories, because they all begin from one. So I'm sorry if we left out your cooperative. We couldn't get through them all in 20 minutes, but please leave some inspiring stories or notes on the chat, and we will make sure to capture all of those as well. So thanks very much, everyone. We hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks.